Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Steve Kenyon Podcast. I'm Steve Kenyon. We're going to do something a little different today, and I'm kind of excited about it. I think it'll be fun. We are going to share an interview that was done with me. Charly Crawford, National Finals Team Roping Qualifier, hosts a show called the Charly Crawford Podcast, and he came over to the Cowboy Channel studios the other day, and we sat down in a quiet corner and visited for an hour and 40 minutes, I think, by the time the show was over. You can go to Charly's podcast and find the complete show. I'm going to share the first half hour or so with you today. Charly and I talked about his career, about my career, about some of the things that we have in common. Full disclosure, I've known Charly Crawford since he was a kid. I announced all of his high school rodeos growing up when I was still living in Oregon, and Charly was living in Canby, Oregon, later on moved to Prineville, Oregon, if I remember right, and then eventually on to Texas, 10 trips to the National Finals Rodeo. Today, he is no longer competing, but really produces a fun podcast. And so we'll share that with you coming up. I hope you enjoy it. It's a little bit different thing that we're going to do, and I'm looking forward to giving you an opportunity. If you haven't heard it on Charly's podcast sites, you can find it here on mine. Today's show, as always, being presented by the group of people that are behind everything that I have a chance to do in pro rodeo. Rodeo Life magazine, everything rodeo since 1961. Thanks to M2 Ranch Jerky, m2-ranch.com. To Equinity, it's all about the horse, online at teamequinity.com. The Justin Boot Company, the Standard of the West since 1879. The Grandview at Las Vegas, the place we stay during the Wrangler NFR. To Wrangler, the official Western Wear Pro Rodeo. Resistol, the proud sponsors of the Resistol Rookie of the Year Award. The Gooding Pro Rodeo in Gooding, Idaho is having a historic year this year. The Gooding County Fair celebrates its 100th anniversary. To my friends at Next Gen Rodeo, and of course to the Cowboy Channel in our featured interview in just a moment, brought to you by Classic Equine. Play to win. We are Classic Equine, and by Classic Ropes. Let's hear from a couple of our sponsors now. Coming up on the other side, Charly Crawford and me from the Charly Crawford Podcast on the Steve Kenyon Podcast. Is that confusing? Yeah, it kind of is. We'll get to it in just a moment.
For 145 years, Justin has crafted boots tailored for life in the dirt, accompanying your every step with reliability and quality. Whether in the arena lights or long days on the job, our boots are an integral part of your team. With a storied history, our boots echo through generations, connecting the past, present, and ensuring the same quality that we built our name on. Find your boots at justinboots.com.
M2 Ranch Jerky is making waves all over the country. Bull riding world standings leader TJ Gray is taking M2 Ranch Jerky with him to the National Finals Rodeo. He says M2 Ranch Jerky is my favorite snack traveling to rodeos. And soon you'll be able to order M2 Ranch Jerky on Amazon. Pick your favorites from beef, elk, venison, or buffalo, and M2 Ranch Jerky's chef-tested seasonings. True traditional cowboy jerky. M2 Ranch Jerky. Watch for us on Amazon. m2-ranch.com. As we get together on this week of January, right after Martin Luther King Jr. Day, boy, was today an interesting day in our country. A new president inaugurated on Martin Luther King Jr. Day on the day of the College Football National Championship game. A lot happened on Monday, January the 20th. We're recording this on the 21st of January. But the Fort Worth Stock Show and Rodeo is underway. The National Western in Denver comes to an end this weekend. We'll cover all of that on the Cowboy Channel. International Finals Rodeo, the 55th IFR, just came to an end. Cody Reinhardt, saddle bronc rider, set a record, winning almost $75,000 in the IPRA this year. A lot happening over the weekend, and I hope you're doing well and hope the weather's beautiful wherever you are. Keep the folks in Los Angeles that are fighting with those horrible fires in your thoughts and your prayers. My friend Charly Crawford, National Finals Team Roping Qualifier, 10 times. Wife Jackie, is the most prolific money winner with a rope for a cowgirl in the history of the Women's Professional Rodeo Association. He puts on his own podcast. I was episode number 105 or 106, something like that. Charly's been at it for a couple of years and calls it the Charly Crawford Podcast. You can find it on all your favorite podcasting sites. Charly asked me to be his guest the other day, and I thought it was fun. We talked about a lot of things. Charly and I have known each other since Charly was a teenager. I announced all of of Charly's high school rodeos when I was first starting my announcing career growing up and when he was growing up. And that's where we started this interview with Charly Crawford, the 10-time NFR qualifier in the team roping, talking about his escapades in the calf roping. Here's the Charly Crawford Podcast with Steve Kenyon as a guest. And it's brought to you by, this part of the show brought to you by Classic Equine. Play to win. We are Classic Equine, and by Classic Rope. Success is in your hands. You can hear the complete interview if you go to any of Charly's podcasting sites. But here is the beginning of that show with Charly Crawford on the Charly Crawford Podcast, courtesy of the Steve Kenyon Podcast. Are you confused? Me too. Let's listen.
Hadn't been around it much. My dad didn't know much about it. I didn't know anything about it. I could rope good, though.
Right.
I was strictly a team roper.
Right.
Well,
you could catch the
year,
neck fine.
every single time.
Yeah.
But what I mean is I was very memorable. You didn't forget me because there's no way to forget me because I think I cut.
Because you were always in a wreck.
Well, I cut 7 or 8 calf ropes my sophomore year. My horse got wrapped up 5 or 6 times.
I remember.
I got wrapped up. I was very memorable.
You were memorable because you were always in a wreck. Yeah.
Remember, that's when the Spyderco knives first came out.
Yep.
And so when I first started roping calves, I had no idea when you rope the calf around and I roped it like a team roper. Mm-hmm. I got up there, pulled my slack like a team roper, threw my slack straight at the calf, jumped off, ran to the calf. Had no idea you're supposed to grab the rope and block the calf off.
Exactly.
That was all new to me. I had no idea. My dad didn't know either. We were all figuring this out together. He actually trained my calf horse in a couple of weeks. My dad was real good with horses. He was a very good trainer. And he knew pressure and release. So we're working this calf horse on a log. And within a couple of weeks, this horse just has it figured out. Well, as I get it wrapped up in the first couple of high school rodeos, because I didn't know to grab the calf, and the calf shot behind me, wrapped my calf horse up. The next couple of weeks, my dad was out there in the round pen, and he was teaching the horse how to lay down. If he would wrap it up, the horse just learn he would teach it how to sit down. And I come home from school, and he's in the round pen. I said, Dad, what are you doing? He said, I'm trying to teach this horse some self-defense.
Right.
Trying to help this horse stay alive. Because if you keep getting him wrecked, he's got to know that if he gets wrapped up, help is coming soon.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
not the panic.
Exactly. No, those were the days. I mean, we're all learning things. It's amazing though, Charly, to think about how great that entire concept of high school rodeo, and now junior high school rodeo wasn't around when you and Bobby and Brenda and those other folks that I mentioned were competing. But if you'd have had junior high school rodeo back then, you'd have maybe been off to a start that much faster. And you'd have known a few more things about, what to do after you catch the calf so you don't get in a wreck.
Well, luckily, my dad invested in a Joe Beaver rope and take. So props to Joe Beaver, because when he said you're supposed to grab the rope on the way to the calf, my dad and I looked at each other and go, that's going to be a key component.
I never thought of that.
So props to Joe B for keeping me alive.
Yeah, there it is. Well, Joe B's taught a lot of people.
Yeah.
So
we were just strictly team ropers. And so, I always enjoyed when you were announcing at such a young age because of the stats you brought. You knew when every contestant won or did something or something funny on that individual. And so it was an enjoyable experiance.
At that time, I was not a very good rodeo announcer.
Well, I just remember
some people will tell you maybe I'm not now. I don't know. But the thing that kept people wanting me to come and announce your rodeo was that I knew all you guys. I had a chance to get to know all of you personally. I kept track of points and who was qualifying and who was doing what, when, where, why, and how. And that was I knew all the kids. And that to this day, that has still been a part of what I think my job is, either as a broadcaster or when I get the opportunity to go into a rodeo arena and announce a rodeo, is to know everybody. I remember the very first rodeo I ever went to. It was in St. Paul, Oregon, and it was about 1969, 1970, maybe even a little bit earlier than that. And I was 8, 9, 10 years old, and I think we were up in that neighborhood because my dad had, when I got into 4-H, I had a hog project. And there was a fellow up in that neighborhood, in a little town called Jervis, Oregon, that you'll remember, being from Canby, who was raising pigs that we were buying pigs from. And we were in that neighborhood, and we decided to go to the 4th of July rodeo in St. Paul. And I really didn't grow up around rodeo at all. But in 1968, 1969, God knows who I probably had a chance to watch in St. Paul on the 4th of July. Larry Mahan, Mel Lambert was the announcer there. And I don't even know if you remember Mel or not. But he was from Salem, Oregon, did the NFR a couple of times back in the 70s, had this really smooth kind of buttery voice. And the thing I remember is not so much what happened in the arena or who I saw, but I remember listening to this guy and listening to him talk about all these people and thinking, this guy's everybody's friend. He knows all these people. He knows the Native Americans that are in the wild horse race. He's friends with everybody. And to this day, I think that's kind of stuck with me a little bit. That idea that this man that I listened to, who was literally the very first rodeo announcer I ever listened to in my life, knew everybody. And I came away from that thinking that was the job, to explain the event, to explain the sport, and to try to be try to know everybody, try to sound like you're everybody's friend.
You said that you didn't grow up in the industry, that you kind of got drawn into it a little bit later, you said.
Yeah.
What was it what were you doing before you decided to become an announcer, and what drew you into being an announcer in the Western industry?
When I was a kid, when I was growing up, way back in the dark ages when there were 3 channels on television and all that kind of stuff, I grew up on a family potato farm in a little town called Malin, Oregon, down in Klamath County. And I learned early on that there are several things I am incapable of doing. Basically, anything that involves building something. I remember once do you remember old straw choppers back in the day? Way back when? You don't probably, but they were basically a metal box with a couple of blades underneath them and exposed belts on the top. I once set a stubble field on fire. I let a bunch of wet straw build up on top of the straw chopper, and these belts built up a bunch of friction. And the next thing I know, the entire 40 acres was on fire, and the neighbors were flying with every form of water that they could get to keep the fire from jumping over the road into their place. And we got it all contained. But it was at that moment that I realized I really was a terrible farmer. The one thing I always had was a voice. The one thing God blessed me with was a voice and the ability to tell stories. I was in radio.
Okay.
When I was announcing all those high school rodeos that you were competing in, I forget exactly when. I was either living in McMinnville, Oregon, because that's where I graduated from college, at Linfield College in McMinnville, Oregon, doing play-by-play for football and basketball games, or I was living in Pendleton. I forget which. I think when you were rodeoing in high school, I was still in McMinnville. And to this day, I continue to love radio. When I got involved in the National Finals Rodeo, the thing that eventually led me to the Cowboy Channel was in 2008, after working for another gentleman for a couple of years, I was given the opportunity to produce a national radio broadcast in the National Finals Rodeo on an old website called ProRodeoLive.com. And did that for 12 years. And when Rural Media Group started the rural radio that was put on the air in 2013, I remember going to Salinas and doing the very first national radio broadcast of a rodeo on Sirius XM.
Sirius XM.
From the championship round in Salinas. And so that's kind of how that all morphed. But my background is in radio, and my background is before I ever got into rodeo, and I'd love to do this again someday, doing play-by-play. Yeah, football and basketball, and I'd love to. I don't know what's in the plans of the new owners of the Cowboy Channel. I'd love to have a chance to get back on the radio during the NFR if it ever materialized.
Yeah.
There's some. It's kind of a unique deal to describe a team roping run on the radio.
Yeah, it is.
You know, it's people are like, how do you paint a picture of a guy catching a pass and outrunning the rest of the field and running into the end zone for a touchdown, or a guy pulling up for a 30-point three-pointer at the buzzer and swish through the net and he hits a game-winning 3. How do you paint the picture of Charly Crawford backed into the head side, reaching out, slick horn catch, dally up, left turn, here comes Logan Medlin on the heel side for 2, and you were just 4 flat or 3-9 or 3-8.
Yeah, I'm trying to explain that play-by-play.
You know, and doing that in quick a time period and painting the picture. It can be done, and it's an awful lot of fun when you do it.
Well, I remember when you and I got to do it during the NFR.
Yeah, you came up with this one year.
You invited me up there for a couple rounds, and it was fun.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
Oh, yeah.
First day was, obviously I was taking notes and trying to research the steers, and I enjoyed it. It was almost like being a reporter in a way, being ahead of the competition and knowing what everyone has, what they're riding. And then by the third, I was 2 or 3 times. I can't remember.
I think you came up 3 days, if I remember right.
And it was fun.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. I've seen what you're saying on trying to articulate. And what I've always been trying to learn how to do with my clinics is when I've listened to, say, Clinton Anderson or certain people when they announce or commentate and things like that, when you can actually see what they're saying, man, that's some wild communication.
Yeah.
And where yours got such an ability to where because we used to listen to when I was rodeoing there for a few decades, that was all we got. We didn't have the Cowboy Channel.
Right.
It was listening to it on XM radio, and you did such a good job of being able to where when we would listen to you commentate the rodeo, we could see what was actually going on by how you were explaining it over the radio. That's
when I learned how to do play-by-play, there was a gentleman named Bill Garrard, whose name will not mean anything to probably any of your listeners, but he was the general manager and one of the most well-respected play-by-play guys on small market radio in Oregon. He ran KAGO in Klamath Falls, where I got my very first radio job. And he took me with him to do color commentary at a bunch of football and basketball broadcasts for Klamath Union High School, Go Pelicans. Really a terrible nickname, but that's a different story. Anyway, he described it to me really simply. He said, everybody who's listening to you would be at that game if they could be there. You have to be their eyes. You have to paint the picture so they can see it. And that always stuck with me. You remember Bill Schonley did play-by-play for the Portland Trailblazers for years and years and years? He told me something similar. You're painting the picture. And this was, at that time, sports was not on TV at the level it is now. Radio was a much bigger deal. I was my Pro Rodeo Live website, and that morphed into rural radio. We were before the Wrangler Network. The Wrangler Network came along. People started being able to see more and more television, and then somewhere in there, RFD TV got involved, and RFD TV morphed into the Cowboy Channel. I still think there's a place for radio. I really do. I drive a lot. I travel a lot. I listen to a lot of football and basketball and baseball games on the radio when I'm traveling. And I still marvel at the guys that can just paint that picture, create the the greatest baseball broadcasters used to be able to, the Vin Scullys of the world could create an image in your mind where you could literally smell the fresh cut grass and see the dust as the ball bounced across the dirt between second and third base. And those kinds of things to me have always just, I still get goosebumps just thinking about it, because the ability to paint those kind of pictures to me was always just magical.
Well, and your announcing has also evolved a lot too from when we were in high school rodeos.
I hope so.
Then you start, well, what I mean by that is like where your locations have been. You came from the Oregon State High School Rodeo Association, and then now you're starting to get pro rodeo gigs, between some of the rodeos that I remember seeing you at throughout my whole career and things like that. And then now being able to announce the National Finals Breakaway roping.
Yep.
Alongside Bob Tallman.
That was a dream come true.
How about that one?
I just had the chance to work the Eastern Oregon Livestock Show in Union, Oregon for the 30th time. It was my very first PRCA rodeo. I replaced a gentleman named Bob Chambers. Bob had been there for 37 years or something ridiculous like that. They've had 2 announcers in almost 70 years at that rodeo. But that was 30 years ago. That was my first PRCA rodeo. And I knew Bob actually through high school rodeo. Remember, Bob lived in Baker City, Oregon before he moved to Texas. And he and his wife, Kristen, and their daughter, Nicole, were all Kristen was the high school rodeo president there for a while. Nicole was the pole bending champion, I think, 1 or 2 years. And they all live in Texas now. But that's how I got to know the Tallmans. And when I first joined the PRCA, and I told Bob this before the breakaway finals this year, I had a dream that I think probably there are 125, 150 announcers in the PRCA. I had a dream that 100 of us have had, that someday I would get to be next to that man in Las Vegas announcing the national finals. And that came true last December at the South Point, when I had a chance to talk about people like your wife, Jackie, and the 14 best breakaway ropers in the world announcing the national finals breakaway. And it was a kick. It was a lot of fun.
When did you get your card? When did you get your PRCA card?
1993.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then 2024.
Yeah. And the folks in Union said, are you going to, I'm 65 years old. A lot of people think you ought to start retiring. And Union asked me, what do you want to do? I said, I want to announce this thing for another 10 years.
Yeah.
I don't feel like any of my rodeo committees that are listening to this, I don't feel like I've lost anything. I don't feel like I'm 65. I don't know what I'd do if I retired.
Well, your knowledge, in my opinion, has been what's been one of your strengths that really popped out to me, because you stay in the game in so many different ways, interviewing with your podcast, staying up with what's going on with the guys, knowing what's going on in the industry. But, even Jackie, she knows her career fairly well. And when you were announcing the National Finals Breakaway Rodeo, I think 8th or 9th round, she was roping, and you had mentioned that she was maybe 20,000 or something around there, along the lines of being the first female WPRA breakaway roper to get close to $1 million.
Yeah, the first woman. Jackie is going into the breakaway finals, and I forget how much she won when we were in Las Vegas. But going into the breakaway finals, because I researched this because I had her on my podcast, she had won a little over $958,000 in the WPRA with her rope. Not just breakaway, but team roping calves, everything that Jackie's done through her career. And I confirmed this with Ann Bleicher with the WPRA. She is probably sometime in the next year going to become the very first $1 million roper in the WPRA. Now, in Jackie's case, that means that she will actually be, I think, probably approaching, she's over $1.5 million for sure, because she won that little $600,000 check at the American a couple of years ago. She's had some big wins at in the WCRA and some other events that don't count in the WPRA standings. So she's won well over $1 million already. And she's actually probably creeping up on $2 million in her career with her rope. But just in the WPRA, she's at, I'm going to say $975,000, $980,000 now. And
I think for a lot of people to understand what that means for her, just strictly WPRA earnings, is, I would say, since her junior high, high school, college, and then her career after college, WPRA was just, there was only a few events here and there.
Yeah.
We're talking like she wins the first round of the calf rope and we're talking $153.
Exactly.
These are things where what breakaway's done in this evolution in the last 10 to 5 years, just in 5 years, is almost recognizable. 10 years, you don't even recognize it. But what she was winning was just little scraps at a time. And for her to get to $1 million at 42, and the route that she had to do to take it was a lot different than Riley Webb's first $1 million at, is he 21 yet?
Yeah.
Way different. But it's still pretty cool to touch that topic, because she didn't even realize it.
She's going to be the first breakaway. She's going to be the first roper, not just breakaway, but the first roper in the WPRA. And what is the story she tells? She went to a jackpot someplace and won $6,000 in a trailer and thought she had it made. And that was, you guys weren't married yet, I don't think. That was 25, 30 years ago. And now here she is creeping in on $1 million. That money's going to, just like every other money, all of the money in professional rodeo, that money's going to continue to grow. The interesting thing will be, Jackie's going, in 2025, Jackie will become the first $1 million WPRA roper. Kelsey Domer's not too far behind her. How quick will Josie Connor get there? We all recognize that Trevor Brazil has won over $7 million in the PRCA. If you include his earnings at the timed event championships, things like that, Trevor's probably over $8 million by the time you get done. How quick will Stetson Wright get there?
Yeah.
How quick will Riley Webb get there? How quick will Shad Mayfield get there? What will the new mark be? 10 million?
And that's what I think is for the way you explained it, is the fact that, Roy Cooper was the first $1 million, one of the first ones, right? And I remember him being on the cover of the magazine, and that was a huge, huge milestone at that point in time. And then look how, like I say, since then, the money's gotten better and gotten better and gotten better. And so it's not, not as far. Now Riley Webb barely shaves.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure if he's legal to buy a beer,
I think he's 21 now, but it's
close.
It's a recent occurrence. How's that sound?
So and to me, that speaks volumes for the industry of how much it is at least growing in that perspective.
And the interesting thing about it, you talk about perspective. I wish I had saved this one soundbite from an interview I did several years ago with Trevor Brazile. And we were talking about money. And he openly said, look, I'm not making a baseball player's salary. I'm not making whatever these guys make that are, using a bat and a ball and a stick and all that. But I get to get up every day and get on a good horse. And I get to raise my kids in this lifestyle that I love. And that's worth a lot more than just money. And the way that Trevor explained it, he explained it so much better than I just did. It was, I literally wish if I'd saved anything out of any interview I'd ever done, it would have been that one comment. The way that he explained it, you think about it, Trevor Brazile's made $7 million over how many years? How much is Patrick Mahomes going to make this year?
Right.
But Trevor talking about the lifestyle and the ability that he has to do the things that he does with his horses. And Trevor now has morphed into where he's involved in the futurity business. And I know he's not slowing down, and he certainly has just found a different way to go about all of this. But that explanation of why this sport was so important to him, to me, is something that we always need to remember.
I think I've actually heard Dale Brisby on a podcast before, and I like the way he explained it really well. He said, in the Western industry, you're going to work a lot harder for less.
Yeah.
And I think that's where so many people like, this not a get rich quick. This is a slower industry, but we're outside. A lot of us are doing what we love. And so there's a lot of gratification in that. There's a lot of self-worth in that. And one of the things too, is we've talked about evolving and it's such a fine line in this industry of the tradition that made rodeo great has to be kept in some form or another to keep it good, but to also evolve and try to get the money added to where these guys are getting paid, where they can buy their own place and make the sport in the direction it could go without losing that tradition. It's a tricky balance, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I remember when I first got into the PRCA and a long, long time ago, and a lot of guys would tell me, and I don't know if you ever felt this way in your 10 trips to the NFR, but there was a time when you literally rodeoed all year to break even or not lose a whole lot, because you knew if you could get to the NFR,
that's where you make your money.
You could make your money. And now, guys are starting to make $400,000 or $500,000 a year and not win a world title.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden now you're starting to see, and there are other events. There's a team series event going on right across the street from us right now, where we're talking in Fort Worth. I drove in here with my window rolled down, talking to Shane Hanchy and Fred Whitfield. They're headed over to Cowtown Coliseum to, and that's a whole nother avenue to make a pretty nice little chunk of change. I guess my point being, it's really gratifying to see more and more rodeo athletes able to not just get by and try to break even so they can get to the finals, but be able to actually make money during the regular season, get to the finals, and really make a nice, and make the kind of a living that you make when you consider the fact that a rodeo cowboy or a rodeo cowgirl is entertaining fans in anywhere from 50 to 100 venues a year. The football player is getting paid 4 times as much as we do or more and entertaining fans in 16 to 18 venues a year, or 20 if they make it to the Super Bowl. Rodeo athletes entertain a lot of fans in a lot of different places all over the world. I never thought of it in these terms. But it's just nice, and you talk about the tradition, and you talk about maintaining all of that. That is the eternal struggle, I think, in professional rodeo, is how do we maintain our history? How do we maintain our heritage? How do we not depart from the roots of ranching and agriculture and cattle and Casey Tibbs and Larry Mahan and those people who helped to set this sport on the path, while at the same time appealing to the TikTok generation? We've got we live in a life now where people are walking up and down the street staring at their phone more than they are staring at each other. And people have an attention span of about 30 seconds. So what are we going to do in the 2 hours and 15 minutes that we have? The one thing that's changed, Charlie, when I first started announcing, people didn't really worry about, okay, if it took 4 hours for us to have our rodeo, no big deal. I cannot tell you how many times we get done with an event now, and the people who are producing the event, they don't come up and say, boy, great job, Steve. Nice job telling stories about Charly Crawford and his history roping. They come up and say, man, we got it done. 2 hours and 12 minutes. You know, that everybody is looking at the clock now to make sure that we don't go too long, because people have figured out there are a few exceptions. The Pendleton Roundup is never going to be run on a clock. But most of the events that I go to anymore, people are watching, and they want to make sure we're 2 hours and 15 minutes. I remember years when the NFR was done in an hour and 45. So that's the eternal struggle, is how do you maintain the history? How do you maintain the heritage? And how do you continue to appeal to the modern generation? Somehow or another, it's working. And the reason I say that is there are rodeos all over the country every year that are setting attendance records. I did an interview on Western Sports Roundup yesterday with Paul Anders, who's the president and CEO of the National Western in Denver. And he said their sales are up for Denver this year, with, as we're recording this, the rodeo about ready to start this weekend. They're probably going to set some attendance records in Denver this year.
I was talking to some of my sponsors and some of the conversations I've had with some other guys that had some businesses out there in Vegas, and they said this year it was wild, record-setting sales. Yeah. In what this economy is right now, where people are, struggling to pay gas and food and rent, with everything which has gone up, insurance, with inflation, and to be able to have record sales, that it's wild to me.
Yeah.
What is your perspective on what's creating that? Because I know the Cowboy Channel has had a big part in that, of educating fans and gaining some fans as well. But, there's Yellowstone and there's a lot of different things. But what is your perspective?
There's the Yellowstone effect. I think the Cowboy Channel has contributed. I think the Cowboy Channel has shone a light on the world of professional rodeo. I really think rodeo has done its part. And this is going to sound a little political, and I don't mean it to. I just simply feel like it's a fact that over the last few years, the country has moved in a direction, and we saw this in the last election, the country is coming back in a different direction, and the country is hungry in a lot of different places for the product that we are selling. Not just the bulls and the bucking horses, not just the ropers and the barrel racers, but the event that embraces patriotism, that starts with a prayer, where people are unabashedly and unashamedly willing to express their faith in the Lord and Savior above. I think that people are hungry for the product we are selling. There is a level of patriotism, of God and country in the rodeo industry that, you never had a controversy with rodeo athletes kneeling during the national anthem.
No, there was always kind of an unspoken rule that if you're kneeling, you better be crippled, because if you're not, you're going to be.
Yeah, exactly. and I just
there
feel
never was an issue.
Yeah, and I just really feel like we're offering a product that people can gravitate to, that has a feel of Americana, and a feel of patriotism, and a feel of what a lot of Americans have been hungry for and looking for.
And for us, in my opinion, for us, it's more. For us, it didn't seem like that was that long ago.
Yeah.
I remember every time my dad, the way we were raised was, I was raised Democrat. My family was through the unions. My dad worked for the power company,
sure.
and my stepmom, she worked in a chicken plant and then a battery plant. So back then, a lot of them were fighting for good working conditions.
Yeah.
Way different situation for kind of what it is now, but. It was proud to be an American. We had songs by Lee Greenwood that sang about it. We had, my dad was, if you didn't buy American, we ain't buying it. Mm-hmm. There was so much pride in America. So like I said, we remembered that. And then things got easy. And then, however, the political the turmoil kind of turned. But it does feel like we woke up. We've been through.
Again, this is going to sound pretty political, and I don't mean it to. It's just it's honestly my perspective is, and if I'm wrong, people will tell me. We have been through 15, 20 years of getting a little bit lazy because, our biggest first world problem is, oh my God, my phone's not working.
Or where is it?
Yeah, exactly. And now all of a sudden over the last few years, we've had to struggle to pay bills. We've had to struggle to buy gas. We've had to deal with those kinds of things. And we still live in President Trump says, make America great again. We still live in the greatest nation on the planet. I firmly believe that. But we have seen a lot of Americans kind of get reminded that this all ain't easy all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And now here we are. The president says we're going to experience an American Renaissance. The golden age is coming.
He is on fire.
And he's on fire. And
the mainstream media is having a hard time just keeping up.
Yeah, exactly.
We're looking to buy Greenland. We want to make Canada the 51st state. We're gonna get back the canal. We're gonna go fishing at the Gulf of America. They can't even keep up with all the stuff.
What's funny about Trump is I really think a lot of that is, he wrote a book once upon a time called The Art of the Deal. He hosted a TV show for a lot of years that was one of the most popular television shows in the country, The Apprentice. He's doing a lot of negotiating in public right now. And are we going to end up owning Greenland? I don't know. Are we going to end up having a really good deal with Greenland or that helps? Are we going to end up with Canada as the 51st state? Probably not. But he's right. If you've rodeoed up in Canada, if you think of the potential powerhouse that a partnership of the United States and Canada could become.
Absolutely.
With all of the natural resources in Canada?
Yeah, and you think of the natural resources in Greenland as well, but then you think of, Russia and China, and all of a sudden America got bigger.
Yeah.
They'd be crapping.
Yep.
That strength that could be presented, but then you think about all the Canadian ropers or the rodeoing up there in Canada. Now all of a sudden the dollar would be the same.
Yeah.
I bet there's a lot of rodeo guys that are welcoming that idea.
Yeah.
Not having to worry about the border and
all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's and to bring this back around to, the discussion about rodeo, I really believe that I see it in the crowds that I watch when I'm announcing. They're listening to me. I'm watching them because I want to know when I'm announcing, what are they responding to? What are they bored by? Every rodeo committee should do this. Every rodeo committee should have one person who is assigned to just simply watch the crowd. And if there's a moment where everybody in the audience gets up to go buy a beer or go to the bathroom and they're not focused on the arena, you need to change that moment in your production. And I watch the crowd and I really feel like audiences are just buying the product that we're selling. Forgive me for being redundant, but I think that we've tapped into something. Or maybe we had it all along and people are rediscovering it now is a better way to put it. We've tapped into something where people really are able to feel the love of country and God and the patriotism that we exude through the rodeo business.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's one thing that the event that you help us put on as well as a contestant is
that is so much fun.
Well, it's very important, I think, for contestants that want to throw a lot of mud. Go ahead and try putting one on.
Yeah.
What I enjoy is the creativity of it, but I can't tell you how many times I went up there and above the buck and shoots and did exactly what you're talking about. Which ones are they glued to? Which ones are they leaving? Which ones are they, going to the bathroom and coming back on? That is a very strategic, because that, Susan Canode, she helps us a lot as well.
Right.
And one of the things that she's reminded me of a lot too is that remember that we are in the entertainment business.
Yep.
So it is important to be able to look and see how this creates entertainment to keep people that want to keep coming back to it.
There's a lady at the rodeo in Santa Maria, California named Tina Tanasha, and she's the one that taught me that idea that you really need to be paying attention to what your crowd's paying attention to. And Tina and her guidance, along with the people around her and first Cotton Rosser and then Reno Rosser with Flying U, they have really kind of built something that's pretty impressive, I think, in Santa Maria. And that's the way that they approach it. They watch the crowd. You learned something after you got done competing, putting on the American Heroes Celebration and the Liberty and Loyalty Foundation event that you put on every year in November, this great team roping, which, by the way, if you get a chance to next year, come watch this roping, because you're not just going to watch a roping, you're going to watch a spectacle that celebrates the country. And Charly Crawford and all of the people around him do such a fabulous job putting it on. It's an honor to be a small part of it, Charlie. It really is.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And you bring such a good presence to it as well, and so we appreciate having you.
I get a kick out of announcing with Farron Lucero. He is a team roping encyclopedia.
Mm-hmm. I figured you two would love it because, exactly right. He knows so much on team roping where you know so much stuff. I thought, man, that'd be cool to watch.
Yeah, but the one thing that you learned, and maybe I honest to God think there's no way to put this rule in. It would never become a reality. Every single one of us who is competing in rodeo, who is involved in, whether we're an announcer or both, we should all have to put one or two on in our lives before we get our PRCA card. I put on 3 rodeos back in Western Oregon long, long ago, and they were all a dismal failure. And I learned that I really am terrible at production, but I also at least learned something about what it takes behind the scenes to make all these things happen.
The rodeo committees are the unsung heroes.
They are.
And they really are what makes rodeo great.
They are.
Because without them, there isn't. It's not like PRCA puts on rodeos. These committees are the people that put on. They're the people familiar with the community. They go out and hustle and go get the money. There's so much unsung heroism that they bring that makes this industry great.
Yeah. And it's I love the fact that so many events are able to increase their prize money now and make these events more profitable for the contestants. But I want the contestants to always remember that there is somebody in that community, small, medium, or large size, that is going to the local beer distributor, the local appliance store, the local car dealership, the local dairy farm, and asking those people to put up their hard-earned money to become sponsors of the event, who make it possible for rodeo contestants to show up and rope at a $10 or $12, $15 or $20,000 added rodeo. Mm-hmm. And instead of leaving town with a $2,000 or $3,000 check, maybe leaving town with a $5,000 or $6,000 or $8,000 or $10,000 check. But there's a progression there. That money has to come from somewhere over here before it gets into the roper or the bareback rider or the bronc rider or the bull rider's bank account. Mm-hmm. And it's starting with somebody on a local rodeo committee going to some group of people in the local business community and saying, hey, we want to do this. We want to bring all this into town. Here's what's in it for you. Can you write me a check for $10,000? Or $5,000. For some people, that's not a big check. For some people, it's ginormous.
Yeah.
For some people, $2,000 is all. I've got a rodeo in Othello, Washington that I announced, and they, for years and years and years, their sponsorship program has been a whole bunch of local farmers and a whole bunch of local business people. They don't maybe give a whole bunch between them, but what they give accumulated adds up to a pretty good sized chunk of added money in whatever event they're sponsoring. And that rodeo has grown in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. It's it's a pretty good sized Columbia River Circuit rodeo now.
Yeah.
And I understand contestants want to go to where they can get paid the most, but I also always want contestants to remember, where does the money start? Where does it come from? How does it get to where it's available for you to compete at? And if contestants will remember that, then I hope the contestants will remember that the people who put on the rodeo that is in the small rodeo category work just as hard, if not harder, than the people who put on the events in the medium and large rodeo size rodeo category. That was the first 38, 39 minutes of an hour and 40-minute interview that Charly Crawford and I did, talking about rodeo, talking about the sport, talking about family, talking about life. I really, really enjoyed doing that. I appreciate Charly providing me with the invitation to be on his show, the Charly Crawford Podcast. And Steve Kenyon Podcast, of course, is brought to you by Rodeo Life Magazine. Everything Rodeo since 1961 by M2 Ranch Jerky. Team Equinity by the Justin Boot Company, by the Grandview of Las Vegas, by Wrangler and Resistol, the Gooding Pro Rodeo, by Next Gen Rodeo, and by the Cowboy Channel. And thanks to Classic Equine. Play to win. We are Classic Equine, and by Classic, to Classic Rope. Success is in your hand. Please like and subscribe to our shows, to our Facebook page, and to our social media sites. We've got more fun stuff coming up this week. Thank you for listening, and thank you for enjoying the Steve Kenyon Podcast.